Okay, so let's talk about the question everyone keeps asking right now. Was Kilmar Abrego Garcia in a gang? Because that question is at the center of this firestorm, and it's being used by some people to justify what ICE did to him. But when you really look at what we know and how the government handled this, the bigger story isn't about gangs. It's about what happens when the government makes a mistake and then refuses to fix it. So first, quick background in case you're just jumping in. Kilmar Abrego Garcia is a 29-year-old from El Salvador. He came to the US when he was 16, saying he was fleeing gang threats. He ended up in Maryland, got married to a US citizen, and has a child there. And in 2019, an immigration judge looked at his case and ruled that he could not be deported, because sending him back would likely put him in danger. That wasn't a suggestion, it was a legally binding court order. That should have been the end of it. But in March of 2025, ICE detained him anyway and deported him to El Salvador. And to be fair here, they later admitted that it was an administrative error. A mistake. Now, accidental deportations have happened before. Usually when they do, the government takes responsibility and brings the person back. Fast. But this time, that didn't happen. Because once the mistake was pointed out, the Trump administration just didn't fix it. Even after a federal court ordered them to return Kilmar. Even after the Supreme Court said the same thing. They're still refusing to comply. That's not a clerical error anymore. That's the government openly defying the courts. Now, let's get into the actual question. Was Kilmar in MS-13? Here's what the government has alleged. Back in 2019, he was arrested in Maryland. He had been looking for day labor work outside a Home Depot when police approached him and a few other men they suspected of loitering. One of the other men allegedly tossed something under a car, and Kilmar was taken into custody during the stop. But in the arrest report, they noted that he was wearing a Chicago Bulls hat and a hoodie. A gang task force officer said those clothes matched MS-13 symbolism. That same report referenced a confidential informant who claimed Kilmar was known as Chele and was trying to become a member of an MS-13 clique in New York. But here's the issue. There's no record Kilmar ever lived in New York. And the officer who wrote that report? He was later convicted of misconduct in another case. So while that doesn't automatically make the information false, it definitely raises questions about how reliable it is. Then, in 2022, Kilmar was pulled over in Tennessee while driving a group of people from Texas to Maryland. ICE flagged it as potentially related to human trafficking and pointed out that he had an expired driver's license, which, they said, was already associated with gang activity. But again, no charges were filed. No trial, no conviction. There's also a protective order his wife filed in 2021 for domestic violence. She later said they reconciled, went to counseling, and the order was dropped. Put all of that together and here's what you've got. A handful of incidents over several years that might be suspicious, but none of them led to criminal charges. None of them were proven in court. So, do we know he was in a gang? No. Do we know he wasn't? Also no. But more importantly, and this is the key point, it doesn't actually matter when it comes to what happened to him. Let's say for a moment that everything ICE is alleging is 100% true. Even then, the government still can't do what they did. Because remember, in 2019, a judge looked at this man's case and ruled that he had the legal right to remain in the United States. If ICE believed he had joined a gang since then, they had options. They could have gone back to court, filed a motion, presented new evidence, let him respond. That's how due process works. Instead, they bypassed all of it. They deported him anyway. And now, when two separate courts, including the Supreme Court, have told them to fix it, they're saying no. That's not about gangs, that's about power. And that's the part everyone should be worried about. So, was Kilmar Abrego Garcia in a gang? We don't know. The evidence is thin, unproven, and never tested in court. But what we do know is this. A man who was legally protected from deportation was still deported. The courts told the government to bring him back, and the government said no. That's the real crisis here. Because if court orders mean nothing, if the law only applies when the government feels like following it, then we're not just talking about immigration anymore. We're talking about the collapse of due process. And if it can happen to him, it can happen to anyone. Thank you for watching today's video. Like and subscribe if you're here for straightforward, no fluff political news coverage. I'm Addison Voss. See you in the next one.